Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Peter? Peter, can you hear me?
Hello?
No. Can you hear me, Peter?
Hello?
Peter, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yep.
Yes, beautiful. Awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Awesome. So, welcome. We will get started. Welcome, everyone. Mate, can we? No. Right. There we go. Welcome to the Audit Committee meeting. I'll start off with the statement of acknowledgement, and then we will do introductions to people that are in attendance. So we would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today, and that is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to living Kaurna people today. Okay, so in attendance today, we have Peter Fairley-Jones online due to him not feeling 100%, so welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
We would like to welcome Christine at her first audit committee. So welcome, Christine. I don't know whether you want to do a little bit of an introduction on yourself.
Okay, really quick one, local government involvement is I chair the Yankalilla Council Audit Committee, and I'm also on the Clare Audit Committee. I am a chartered accountant, experienced as a CEO, and have done plenty of audits and accounts and risk framework reviews. So looking forward to being on the Gawler Audit Committee. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Christine. And we have we don't have any apologies, and we welcome Bentleys, David and Jonathan, and also we have Wendy in attendance as well. Hi, Wendy. Welcome. All right. So no apologies. No motions to grant leave of absence or leave of absence, and no non-attendance. So we'll move on to point 3. Are there any declarations of interest? good. All right, item 4, which is the confirmation of the meeting minutes from last time. Mayor Redmond will move. Have I got a seconder? Yep, Councillor Davies. All in favour? And carried unanimously. All right, and is there any business arising from the minutes? No. Okay, so we'll go straight into item 6, which is the risk management framework review. So I'll hand over to Begley, and you can explain this item to us.
Thanks for having us today. I'll take you through at a very high level, what we've got for you and the process that we've undertaken. Obviously, in regards to the detail, I'll take it all as read and happy to field questions in due course. The key pieces of work that we were engaged to do was to look at the risk framework as a whole. One of the most important parts of that is the risk appetite statements, which is the first of the documents that you'll see, or the first part of the suite that you've got from us today. The key there is risk appetite statements, and defining the appetite of the elected member body is crucial, I think, in communicating the message to the community of what the intention of the council is that's currently sitting, and what the where you're heading and how you're heading in a certain direction. It's also very important for the elected member body to set the appetite to enable management to do what they do. We believe that when you know the appetite that you have and the level of risk that you're prepared to take as an organisation, everybody can act in accordance with that very clearly defined appetite, and get about their day knowing they're doing the right thing, or more likely to do the right thing under instruction. So it is a communication, transparency and an empowerment tool, which we're really glad to see that the town of Gawler have embraced. So that's what's been proposed for you today. It's in the various categories that are relevant and have been decided and deemed relevant. This process was done through a lot of consultation and engagement. We actually had a few workshops with the elected member body to define what risk appetite is, and also the level of risk that the elected member body was prepared to take. So it's been a very thought out and considered process. We got to the point of drafting up the wording that would be that you see today in a workshop environment with the elected members themselves. So it was very hands-on and again, important process. And it was great to see the elected members that were there taking part of this process and taking true ownership of the risk appetite statements, because it is one of those tone from the top type of documents that we hear about. So that's mostly about the process that we've undertaken. Obviously, you've got the appetite statements in draft for consideration today. Actually, they may have been approved. I'm not sure if they've been through council yet. No, so it's in draft for your consideration. Further to that is the risk framework itself. It's a big document. It was effectively something that I believe was already in existence at Town of Gawler, but we've taken it and enhanced it. So I won't really go too much further into the risk framework itself, but certainly happy to take questions on either two at this point.
All right, thanks, David. Councillor Koch.
Thanks. I'm just looking with the attachments. I'm looking at risk management principles, and one of them there is the human and cultural factors. That's on page 6 of 33. So it comes up a few times. I'm just concerned about, for example, innovation. For example, how human behaviour is going to affect us achieving something. Page 6 of 33. Risk management principles. Because I mean, so far you've said you've talked to executive, councillors, etc., but I'm not sure whether you've spoken to the people on the ground.
Six, 3, 12.
and implementing our risk appetite.
Through the chair, I can respond to that. That's one of the elements of the ISO 31000, which is considered in that during the development of this, there is, as I mentioned, we enhanced aspects of that. Certainly, as it goes through and considered, we've engaged with the executive in that regard, and also with management to consider and understand the impacts of this. In that regard, there wasn't a material change which would impact any human factors. However, once the risk appetite statements are actually endorsed and the respective metrics, certainly then there'll be further engagement and also training in that regard to actually help understand and how that's integrated into the organisation.
The reason I ask is because part of it is if we want to be innovative, and we've got an appetite to be innovative, but maybe the staff at the coalface may not want to be innovative because they might see it as a risk to their jobs, for example. So how do we work through that? Okay.
If I could have a go at that, I think it's important that the organisation sees leadership, both from myself and the executive team collectively, in terms of its appetite for innovation and, you know, pushing the envelopes. And sometimes we're successful and other times we're not. But I think that overarchingly, it is a culture that we embrace new ideas, that we embrace that sometimes those ideas may not succeed, but, you know, we're not here just to warm the seat, and we need to push the envelope in a calculated and sort of educated way. So, you know, that's how I look at opportunities and challenges, and that's how my leadership team look at that, and that permeates through the organisation.
Also, my question's around the point 3 in the motion, just because I know we had workshops as elected members about our thoughts on our risk appetite, but when we get into November, surely it will be the new council's view on risk appetite that will be more relevant. I'm just curious if there's any adjusting that we would have to do around that, or if you think it would be fine to just present this. I don't think I've seen the draft yet, but present that to the new council.
Through the chair, obviously being in caretaker mode, the thought from the administration was that this would be a matter to be considered by the obviously new council, given we're in caretaker, but nonetheless wanting I think it was had merit in terms of having the existing council and the audit committee to provide input for the new council when they come on board. So they're not coming from a totally clean slate. They've got feedback from the current council and this audit committee to consider, but it'll be a decision for the new council.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I'd like to speak to it if I can, Chair. Yep, go for it. This has taken 4 years to get to this point, and now we're going into a new council, and it'll be a brand new council, and they'll have to start from scratch. So I'm not particularly confident that the new elected members will understand about risk appetite, etc. As much as we've done some really good work, it's taken too long to get to this point. And I think Councillor Davies hit the nail on the head, because to get people up to speed on risk takes time. And we could see another 4 years without a risk appetite. And I'm actually exceptionally disappointed with that outcome. It shouldn't have taken this long. I really am disappointed. I think the process was a good one. I think Bentley's have done an outstanding job in engaging with the elected members, but it took way too long to get to the elected member level.
And it is the council that endorses our risk framework. It is the council and the elected member group that needs to understand this process, and it took way too long to get to that point. And as mayor, I'm exceptionally disappointed. As someone who understands risk appetite, etc., it shouldn't have taken 4 years. As I said, the process that the elected members went through was a good one. It was very engaging, it was inclusive, and I think we've got some good risk appetite statements, but it shouldn't have taken that long. And I would be really concerned if it took another 4 years before it got to the elected member level to make the elected members aware of what their core responsibility is around risk. So I would like to see this audit committee provide timely advice, but also early education to the new elected member group so that it doesn't take another 4 years. It's unacceptable. And I think we've got a good framework here. I really like what's in these documents. I think they're well written. I think they're evidence-based. And but it shouldn't have taken 4 years. And yeah, I'm actually quite frustrated by that. And now we're in caretaker and we have nowhere to go. I just think it's a wasted opportunity. And it doesn't, we can do better than this. And I would like to think that this audit committee will do better than this in the next council term. It shouldn't take 4 years. So I think I'll leave it at that before I say anything further. Thank you.
Just a few comments more on the risk management framework and consistent theme with what the Mayor's just said. On page 28, where it talks about managing risk priority rating, in the severe category, it says, immediate action, but in high and moderate, it just says appropriate timeframes. So I'm just wondering if some consideration can be put to nominating a time frame to act if a risk has been assessed as high or moderate. For low, it says conduct a periodical quarterly review. So if severe is immediate and low is quarterly, then high and moderate must be somewhere in between. But I'd just like to see that a bit tighter so that there is a time frame to act. I've got a list of comments, but want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. Okay, if we go to page 30, you'll see in the review area box, there's some frequencies there that talk about monthly reporting to the Audit and Risk Committee, but obviously the Audit and Risk Committee doesn't meet monthly. So I think we just need to think about that table. Obviously you can report to executive management monthly, but I think it just needs a bit of review on the timing of when it's reported to the Audit and Risk Committee, because we're not going to be looking at it monthly. Sorry, go back to page 29. We talk about risk treatment options in the box there, and you'll see that it talks about eliminate, share, mitigate, and accept. But then on page 35, when we talk about risk treatment, we have different definitions of avoid, reduce, transfer, accept, and share. So this is a question to Bentley's. Are those two risk treatment descriptions supposed to be the same, or are they supposed to be different? Comparing page 29, risk treatment options, which are eliminate, share, mitigate, and accept, to page 35, risk treatments, which are avoid, reduce, transfer, accept and share. So I'm just wondering, are those classifications, definitions supposed to be the same, or are they supposed to be different?
Through the chair, noted, and we'll correct that.
Oh, it's working. Yep. It's okay. So it's supposed to be the same. On page 36, which I've just got to find myself. Keep going. Okay, we've got 6 categories across the top of this table, but earlier in this document, we identified 8 risk categories. So I was trying to match the 8 risk categories with the 6 categories on this page. And I accept that maybe the cyber risk that has been identified as one of the 8, I think that has a whole separate document, maybe, because it's such a big topic. But then we've got the human and I think it's the culture risk category. So I'm just wondering where that belongs on this page 36. So I guess another question to Bentley's.
Thanks for identifying that. That's something we're discussing with executive management as a next review. So I think we wanted to certainly keen to bring this in, but it requires a whole level of consultation in that regard. This is the existing consequence table. Regarding other categories, they're certainly relevant as identified for the risk appetite statements. However, future work, we're certainly keen to align it more to the strategic plan 2030 as well. So that will take a different theme and make it more, it's a lot easier for people to use too. Yeah.
Okay, last one. So on this page 36, we've got consequences, which are insignificant, minor, moderate, major, and extreme. But when we go to page 38 in the risk matrix consequences, we've got a category called catastrophic, which isn't used on page 36. So I'm just wondering, again, is this an inconsistency in terminology, or are they supposed to be different?
Through the chair again, that's a matter which we've got to correct as we go. And again, we weren't given license to change.
Well done, Christine. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Davies.
Well, I'm happy to second the motion potentially. I don't know if maybe it would be worth having a point 4 about a workshop for new elected members early in the new term, if the mover is happy with that. Yeah.
Well, it needs to be with audit committee members. It can't be without, because otherwise we're going to wait another 4 years. So a workshop be held with audit committee, independent members and the consultants. And the new council and new council members and the new council, just the new council rather than council members. Can't see it. In the first 6 months of the new term of council. Could be in the first 3 months, but that's probably a bit tight. That means it won't be endorsed until they have that workshop. So we will be waiting another 4 years, unfortunately. I think that's disappointing.
Henry?
Just on the comment about made regarding it's taken 4 years to get to this point, the committee only spoke about the need for a risk appetite probably 18 months ago. And yes, we should have done it earlier than what we have, but it's not been 4 years. And it won't be another 4 years until the matter is progressed through the new council. We do have the lion's share of the work done. It will be as per the motion, but it was always the intention, as per the resolution, that this work is presented to the new council upon and as a consequence of the election. And so I'm more than happy for that to be reflected in the motion. We are working on a training program for the new council from the election through to 30 June, and this will be very much part of that process. So.
I've actually been bringing this up for 4 years, so with all due respect, that's incorrect. It hasn't been 18 months; it's been quite a bit longer, but it's taken this long to actually get to the elected member body. So, with all due respect, I disagree with those comments. It has been brought up consistently over a number of years, so it is disappointing, and I can't see it coming in quickly because new elected members will take a little while to get their head around risk, and I think that's exceptionally disappointing.
So, yeah, with this point, I'm happy to second it. I think, regardless of when it was started, for the purposes of this council, the councillors haven't had a risk framework to work from when making council decisions over the 4-year term. So that's why I would like to make sure that, because we'll have at the very least 3 new councillors, because only 7 of the current council have renominated, could be more. And, this is the kind of thing that's very important to when you come up to the budgets and everything, how you put your priorities, what things to approve and not approve. So it was just important to make sure that and just putting it as a report in itself, I think a lot of councillors would look at the, 800 pages of attachments and skim through the risk management thing and sort of tick it when it comes by if it's just one on a long list of an agenda. So a separate workshop, I think, would be valuable.
Just a question now that we're talking about wording of the motions. Can we put something in too? Because we're being asked to endorse the risk management framework, but I've just raised some amendments
So
to it. So can we mention something about that?
So endorse as amended.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can just put as amended after endorse. Oh, just strict principle. All right, are there any other comments? Peter, did you have any comments?
Yeah, excuse me, yes. Only that really at this point, I'm very pleased for item 4 to be inserted in the recommendation, because I think that's, I feel like I've missed out a bit of the journey in this. And I must say I found the information very dense, very definitional, and that might be fine for setting a risk appetite and framework and so on. But I'm wondering about the next stage of all this. Okay, the council can sign off on it and understand it and so on. But then where does it go from that point through the organisation? And I would have some concerns about how that might, if that's the case, how that might be translated, because it's a pretty big ask, I think. A lot of the staff to get their head around it. So I'm getting a bit of feedback. I hope I can be heard. Thank you. Just a comment.
Peter?
Yeah, one of the mechanisms that we are building, or we will be building out with the administration, is KPIs relating to the information that you've got here effectively, which will start to embed risk management and achieving the objectives of it and the risk appetite statements on a day-to-day basis. So that'll be part of the reporting suite. I'd have to go back and look at our scope. I certainly recall in our proposal that we did talk about supporting the embedment of risk management within the business, undertaking training. I can't quite remember exactly what has been approved and what is pending, but it's certainly part of the process or the journey, dare I say, that we proposed. So ingraining risk management and risk appetite and everything that you're seeing today throughout the organisation is absolutely a critical part of the process, of which some of it we are here to support, and we can support if needed further, or if not, Henry and the team will take carriage of it thereafter. But that's certainly the plan from our perspective.
Thank you. Anything else? We're all good. I think the risk management framework is a really good document. That's a really robust document which covers off all the aspects, which is really good. As Christine said, there's a couple of tweaks, but you're gonna get that because just due to the size of it. The risk appetite statement looks good, and from my experience, the risk appetite statement is a working document. We now have a risk appetite statement. Is it 100% perfect? No, but we'll get that endorsed, and then we can do a risk refresh every year to make sure that, you know, it gradually improves over time, but that's common across a lot of organisations. With the new elected members in the council, you would have to have an induction program anyway, regardless of whether the risk appetite statement had been around for 2 years or not. And it's a journey that you have to go on, and that's a challenge that, you know, local government, state government, everyone has the same challenge with that. And operationalising the risk appetite statement is always a challenge for organisations. I've seen it in my organisation, and it's, you know, all part of that change management process and making sure people know how to use it. But it is quite a new concept to a lot of people, and it will take time to embed it and for it to become second nature within the organisation. But I think this is a really good starting point. So well done. There's no more comments, then we've got a mover in Mayor Redmond and a secondary in Councillor Davies. Can I show hands of all in favour? Yeah, passed, carried unanimously. Excellent. All right. So now we'll move on to item 6.2, which is the Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report. Yeah, thank you, Bentleys, for your time and attending today. And I'm sure we will see you soon. Okay, Paul, did you want to talk to this item?
Thank you, through the chair. Obviously part of the work plan for the committee in terms of references to table a annual report for council. So hence tonight what we're tabling to you is the 21-22 Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report, which is basically reflective of what the committee's done during the year, and it's an information report for the committee to determine, and it will then be presented to council at the next council meeting.
Thanks, Paul. Are there any comments or questions on this document? Christine?
The risk of sounding really nitpicky, on page 40, Councillor Cody Davies' commencement date was probably 1st of December 2021, not 2022.
Good pick up, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Peter, did you have anything to say? No, all good. I think it's a very comprehensive report, which covers everything that we have done over the past year. And I've just provided a statement at the end. Sorry, I've just had a computer glitch. On page 53, And then I've just summarised in that report that, we have focused on the issue, the financial issues, and making sure that, we've considered, the impact of inflation, increase in fuel costs, and increase in interest rates as part of our decisions throughout the year. Also thanking the people that were involved in the audit committee throughout the year, new members and people that have departed, and also our appreciation to council management staff that have supported this process throughout the year, including Henry, and all the hard work that goes into producing the documentation for our review. So thank you. All right. So do we need to move in a... Yeah, so I've got someone to move it. Councillor Koch, and a seconder. Peter Fairley-Jones, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay. The next item is the policy review. Paul, did you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you through the chair. As the committee is aware, with the work plan, we are at regular intervals tabling policies to you as they come up for review. So as part of that process, Chair, we're presenting to you tonight a review of the community loans policy and corporate purchase card policy for feedback and review.
Thank you. Councillor Koch.
Yeah, I've just got some questions on the loans. Page 55 of 134, 3.4, it talks about net financial liabilities ratio. I wasn't aware that we took that into account when we were providing loans to people. For example, when we gave a loan to the bowling club, I don't think, did we take that into account then or not?
Through the chair, yes, this has been in the existing policy, and so the applications, when they are filled out, are considered in accordance with the policy, and on that basis, Chair, we do that analysis of their financial position, primarily to, I guess, make sure that they've got the financial capacity to meet the loan repayments.
It's on 56 of 134, talks about defaulting of a loan. If you've got a community group who's defaulting a loan, what remedy have they got? I mean, usually they haven't got anything. They're a soccer club or whatever. I won't say that, but you're a club.
Through the chair, which clause are you referring to? 4.14. Look, through the chair, I guess that clause is specifically in there in the unlikely event. We hope that the community group would default with all the community loans we've got. Chair, we've never been in that situation, which has been good, and I think that's sort of facilitated by the analysis we do prior to council agreeing to the loan in the first place, to make sure that they've got the financial capacity to meet their repayments. And I think from memory, we've got 2 or 3 community loans, and they're all being appropriately met as those payments fall due.
Are there any other questions? Peter, have you got anything to add?
My only question really was how many loans we have. Do we have many loans outstanding? Sounds like there are a few. And also, is it the experience that this policy is working appropriately? Sounds like it is.
Through the chair, I think we've got 4, no more than 4 community loans. We've got, and relative to the assessment of them, that they have been considered in accordance with the policy. They're being repaid as the payments fall due, and the loan values we're talking about, Chair, are pretty modest relative to the likes of Gawler Central and South Gawler Cricket Club. I think in the order of 20 to 30,000 with over sort of 10 years. And we had the slightly unique one with the Gawler Bowling Club, where we've actually taken a loan out with the LGFA quite some years back as a cash advance debenture facility on the because that was, I think, up to 100,000 for them to put in synthetic surfaces for their bowling greens, and they were able to actually repay that very quickly. And the loan was set up such that they could redraw on that facility if they wanted to for future replacement of their synthetic surfaces. So in short, yes, I don't see any issues with the current loans at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
So does this include the community house? I think there was a loan, interest-free loan when they had termite problems a few years back. Is that under this policy?
Through the chair, Lakesh or Aaron might just be able to provide clarification. I know with the community house, when they had those major repairs done, yeah, I know there is a sort of transactions between us and them in terms of a net result, but Lakesh or Aaron, if you can just provide some further clarification.
Through the chair, so their loans set up, yes, we did use the policy to assess that loan, but the difference with that particular loan is that it's actually being repaid back by using an existing arrangement. That's a donation that we make to them of $15,000. So we actually use $10,000 of that contribution to pay down this loan, and we pay them their $5,000 in cash still. So it's slightly different.
Any other comments or questions?
On the corporate purchase card policy.
Sorry, can I just
Are we
say
still on
something
community?
about the
Yeah.
Community loans before we move on to the corporate purchase card policy? I'd just like to see a sentence in there about, and I don't think I missed it, but just a regular review of the existing loans. We have all this upfront approval process, which is great, but given the current financial environment, I'd just like to see, and I'm not sure the term of the loans, but just to have a regular 6 monthly or a yearly review, high level review, but just to make sure that they're still on track, and especially with the building costs and everything increasing, that they're still able to service that loan before you get to the end of the term and realise there's a problem and it's too late. Okay. Now, Christine, we'll move on to, if there's no questions on the corporate loans, we'll move on to the corporate purchase card policy.
Okay, I'm on page 61 in the section on payment processing, and it talks about card holder has to reconcile the statement and provide receipts and all that. And then 6.2 talks about if there's discrepancies, they've got to be rectified before further use of the card is permitted. I'm just wondering, has that ever happened? Like, is that being implemented if people are not providing their receipts, or do people provide their receipts and reconciliations on a timely basis?
Lakesh, do you want to respond?
Thank you. So through the chair, we do get reconciliation done on a monthly basis, and the card users do provide us the receipts. In case there isn't any receipt, they do provide a statutory declaration, but it has to be approved by the supervisor, manager, and the CEO, and if it's a director's credit card.
Okay, so I was just trying to establish that there isn't anyone merrily spending and you're having to chase them down for the receipts, that people understand they've got to provide them.
Through the chair, the committee can be assured, yes, the finance staff do monitor and reconcile these on a monthly basis. Just that's definitely the case.
Any other comments or questions, Peter? Anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On paragraph 2.2.2, which is on page 59 of 134. 2.2 there talks about delegated authority, and it says the following officers have authority, etc. In other words, the CEO has the authority to issue the card, approve the cards, and then 2.2.2 talks about corporate cards are managed by the financial accountant and overall control. No, it just doesn't quite read correctly, I don't think, there. Is that a delegated authority to manage the cards, or is it just a statement of fact that the cards are managed and therefore it needs to be a separate point? That's really my question as to whether it's actually a delegated authority.
So that statement there says, like the CEO, whenever we receive an application for the credit card, it is approved by the CEO, but anything to do with managing the transactions or checking the transactions against the cards, that's done by financial accountant, and it's also being checked by the manager finance. So we can't issue a card without CEO's approval, and like all the management on the ground is done through finance manager and financial accountant.
Yeah, okay. So you assume that as a delegated authority to do that work. Is that what we're basically saying? It's just a question of whether it's delegated authority or whether it's just a task that's applied to a person to manage the process as opposed to authorising the cards. Yeah. If you're happy with that, that's fine.
Are we able to amend just to make sure that's clarified? Yeah, because it could be open to interpretation. Any other comments or questions?
The only other comment, sorry, that I was going to make was in relation to, I've seen in some situations people use their own purchasing or their own credit card, even though they might have a corporate credit card, but they use it because they want to get travel points or something. And I just wonder whether it's appropriate to put something in this policy around forbidding the use of a person's using their own credit card and then seeking reimbursement.
Through the chair, I'm not aware that we've had any instances of staff seeking to use their own credit card. It's invariably staff going to an officer who has a corporate purchase card seeking to use that card for legitimate business needs. So I'm not aware, Lakesh and Aaron, you can confirm, but I haven't been aware of any situation where we've been reimbursing staff for use of their own credit card.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting it was happening here, but I know it's happened in other places and in Victoria, and often councils have a policy that makes it clear that they're not to use their own card in circumstances where they may be tempted to use it for personal benefit.
Yeah, I just want to come. I worked at one organisation where actually the finance officer was using their personal credit card and getting the flybys, and they lost their job. So, yeah, so it's quite serious.
Just a follow-up question. These corporate purchase cards, do they accumulate any benefits like frequent flyer points or that sort of thing? And if so, do those benefits go to the council rather than the individual?
They don't require any frequent flyer points or any benefits of those sorts.
Anything further? Councillor Davies?
I mean, should the council be building up frequent flyer points? Wouldn't it save a bit of money on the trips to Canberra?
Then it enters the gifts and benefits area, and it's just across, local and state government, it's just too hard. You just don't want to go there. So I think it's better to keep it very vanilla. The only point that I had to make was, because this was a topic of the Auditor General review, was that a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, that they picked random councils and decided to do detailed reviews after events at one council. So I don't know whether you, and I'd like to hear if anyone has any feedback, but whether you don't need it in the policy, but this has to be adhered to, and this is a very strict policy with, I suppose, pretty much, a building on what Christine said, but this has to be adhered to, and any deviations from this policy have to be escalated to the CEO and even the Audit and Risk Committee, because it's just, there's too much reputational risk for the council if these aren't followed, which has been historically shown in South Australia, and I know it is on the Auditor General, like they're keeping an eye on it. So whether we need to incorporate that in the policy or just management, if you do see people, continuous non-compliance, then it has to be escalated.
Just a comment on that. I was wondering whether it's worth putting it on the internal audit plan to do spot checks.
Yep. We'll consider that when we review the internal audit plan, but that's a good point. Okay, if there's no more comments or questions, do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation that's been amended to as amended? So Councillor Koch, move. Any seconder? Christine, seconder. All in favour? And carried. Okay, so the next item is item 7, information reports and the building asset management plan update. Paul, did you want to start?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. This is obviously an information report we're tabling to you tonight just to outline the progress that's been made in this space. As we've noted in the report, earlier this calendar year, we had a company called Sprouts who did the buildings condition audit, an updated audit. And as we've noted in the report, since 2017, that was able to pick up the significant work that has occurred on certain buildings since that time. And the summary report that they've provided, noting that the further steps with this process is that we will then consolidate, upload the detailed granular data into what's called our NAMS asset management database to inform the final report to then be tabled to council through the audit committee. But the summary report we've provided as the attachment, we have been in the position to identify what the indicative dollar implications of that building conditions audit is relative to the replacement renewal of the existing buildings. And members, that's outlined on page 14 of 28 in the agenda. And noting that the condition audits reflects an indicative 20-year snapshot. And the pleasing thing, as we've noted in the report, Chair, is that the none of the buildings were identified as being either poor or very poor condition, which was good. Hence, as a consequence of that, in table 1 on page 14, the condition audit wasn't suggesting any replacement renewal funding that would be identified in the first 2 years. Nonetheless, from there on, it has identified, as would be expected, as assets wear out and due to be replaced. It is indicating the indicative dollars that would need to be outlaid to maintain our existing buildings. And Sprout in their reports have referenced the fact that in terms of implementing the plan, updating it to long-term financial plan, consideration may be appropriate to give consideration to flattening out the peaks, troughs and peaks, which is a normal course of event that would occur. And we've also noted in the report that from a asset replacement renewal perspective, the long-term financial plan to now has, pending the completion of the plan, has had indicative provision for replacement and renewal funding, which we've identified is currently adequate for the purposes of the next 10 years. However, what we have noted through this process is Sprout have identified a considerable future investment for periodic repainting over the 20-year lifetime, noting that I would suspect over that 20-year period, most of the buildings would be being repainted twice. So we've just noted that those costs would need to be incorporated into the long-term financial plan, and recognising that painting isn't considered as a capital cost, it's deemed as maintenance. So from an overall capital investment perspective, the dollars relatively align, but from a maintenance perspective, it's indicating we would have to have an increased investment to cover the cost of that periodic painting, which we would do. I think they're the main comments, Chair, but certainly happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Yep, Councillor Koch.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to that comment where it says the existing long-term financial plan currently exceeds optimum funding. Have we over-invested, or have we got too much money tied up in that area?
Through the Chair, Councillor Koch, at the moment, until this plan was finished, we obviously had to have in the long-term financial plan, a sort of indicative provision for replacement renewal, pending the outcomes of the work from Sprout. So what we're indicating in the report is that technically from a replacement and renewal perspective for capital investment, we are adequately covered at the moment. So there's no sort of funding shock in that space, but nonetheless we are flagging that there's that painting component that would need to be considered. So just to be clear, that the dollars in the long-term financial plan at the moment were provisional dollars, noting that we had to have some provision because clearly the plan was always going, the buildings asset management plan on completion would be identifying investment needed, but until the plan was finished, we were just having provisional dollars in there.
Peter, did you have any comments?
Yep, just the first one is relating to these properties which are defined as being under ground leases. And so these buildings are not included in the plan as I read it. I guess first of all, is that right? And should that be the case, that they have they not been recorded as assets in the past on the council's books?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, as we've noted in the report and with the works done through Sprout, a number of years ago when we did do, I think it was about 2017-18, we did do a sort of reconciliation of our building assets relative, taking into consideration to the clauses of the relevant leases for where we had ground leases, and those leases are very clear from the perspective that the ownership, maintenance and management of those facilities lies with the lessee. And on that basis, yeah, they were removed from council's asset register at that time, such that they're no longer included in council's asset register or considered as part of this process. The only circumstance that they would revert back to council would be at the end of the lease, if for whatever reason the current tenants of those facilities were to vacate and leave the council area, which would be deemed highly unlikely, I'd suspect.
Right. Well, did the council put any money into these assets in the first place, or were they entirely built with community funds or someone else's money?
Through the chair, look, a lot of these buildings are considerably old, chair. So, Peter, I can't definitively answer situation was, but look, historically, I'd suggest it may have been a case of potentially grant funding provided from either state or federal or council, that matter. But no, I can't definitively say how they were funded originally at the time.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And there was a reference, sorry, to I think it's on page 82 of 134 to capital upgrade of assets, and it refers to a multi-story car park. Can you just explain the situation with that? As I understand it, it's not going to be included in the management plan. Is that right?
Through the chair, just to be clear, relative to the engagement from Sprout, it was to identify, I think also as we've noted in the report, that their focus was very much on the planned replacement renewal of buildings and not relative to consideration of new and or material upgrades of buildings, because we've noted in the report, I think on page 14 of 28 members, that the consideration of new and or upgraded assets, whether it's buildings or any other fixed assets, is invariably a decision of the council on an annual basis through the budget process. So yes, the consideration from the consultants engaged wasn't on new and upgraded assets, because that's not for them to determine. That's a decision to be made by council on an annual basis through the normal budget cycle.
Right. Okay. But there is an asset there currently, and it is recorded as an asset in the system. It's just not being formed as part of their report. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through the chair, yes, the multi-level car park is included in the assets considered and condition audits done by Sprout, whether it's for that building or any others. We're just indicating that there wasn't consideration done for any major upgrades or new buildings.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Davies.
So I know the Gola South Football Club has been looking for a new home. If they were to move, would that return to our asset register? And are they on a ground lease?
Yes, through the chair, in that situation, yes, I'd suggest under the existing lease, if they were to vacate, those existing buildings would revert back to council.
Go Henry. Henry, do you want to go first?
Yeah, through the chair, I was just thinking, given that conversation, Paul, it might pay to just reference for the committee's benefit where we're at with currently there are a couple of grant applications that we're working through, like the netball facility, which is a $4.6 million. Now that facility is a ground lease. However, if we do, and the funding's been provided to council to expand and project manage and deliver that, and that's something that we're turning our mind to in terms of, well, if we maintain it as a ground lease and council expends that funding, a project managers delivers it, then it would otherwise be an operating expense as opposed to a capital expense. So we are turning our mind to currently these two, well, there's that one in particular, and there might be another one, where what is that threshold that we reach where that expenditure does trigger a change in the classification of the asset relative to a ground or other category of lease. So I think when we get to that point of working through that, it'll be something that we'll report back through to this committee.
Good. Councillor Gosh.
Yeah, I just want to go back quickly to the Gawler South, because I think a rep from the Gawler South said they wish to move in the next 4 to 5 years. Is there any update about that? Would that be a council expense?
Through the chair, look, I don't know personally the intricate details. I'm certainly aware that they are looking to relocate at some stage, but I don't know that there's been any formal sort of consideration by council in that space. So that would only be dealt with at the time it's formally considered by council, but I am aware that anecdotally that's what they're looking to do.
I don't have any more comments on the report itself. Just wondering on resolution number 2, can we put a date on that to say which committee meeting will see the plan and include it in our work plan?
Through the chair, look, I would suggest we may be in a position to table it to the November meeting, but I think just to be prudent, Chair, I would suggest based on the fact the November meeting is generally heavily focused on the end year result. With the external auditors in the room, I think it'd deem it appropriate for that to be presented no later than the February 23 meeting, which would then inform the council's consideration of the long-term financial plan and 23-24 budget.
With that, I just wanted a date on it, that's all.
So we've added the February 23 Audit and Risk Committee for review. Any other comments or questions? No, we're all good. I've got a mover. We need a mover for this. Yep, Christine, seconder. Councillor Davies, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 7.2, which is the internal audit work plan progress report. Or did you want to comment on this?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is one of obviously periodic reports that we'll put through to this committee, because as the committee is aware, we do have a a 3-year internal audit work plan. So what we're tabling to you tonight is progress against that plan. And what we've done in that regard, members, is we've provided the attachment to you, which gives a summary of the recommendations, the actions to be undertaken, and we're giving progress comments to the committee just to inform progress against those actions. And we've highlighted in green instances where those actions have been completed, and for the other ones we're giving progress comments, but either myself or Wendy, who's here, can provide answers to any questions members may have.
Mayor Redman.
Yes, thank you. On page 92 of 134, I'm looking at the management of risk ICT system is inoperable if power supply fails at the admin building. And then across in the recommendation, the top recommendation, consider provision of backup power supply to power the administration building. And across it does say not currently being considered. I would have thought that might be a critical component. So why is it not being considered?
Thank you. Through the chair, my understanding, Mayor, is not currently being considered purely due to the prohibitive cost of it, but I can investigate that further with relevant staff.
Christine?
Got a question. If the power failed, what would be the cost to the council then, if that building couldn't operate?
Through the chair, look, I'd need to really sort of take that on notice, Chair, to be able to give a definitive response.
Because that might help with the cost benefit analysis of whether to set up a separate power supply.
Which then links through to your risk appetite. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, well, while we're on that one, I guess it says inoperable if the power supply fails. Is this implying a current external power supply, or is the power supply currently just with the plug?
Through the chair, if you could just provide sort of a bit further clarity, Councillor Dave.
Also, the point, the finding, ICT system is inoperable if power supply fails at the admin building. I'm just wondering if that was implying that we currently had some sort of system aside from just, the regular supply to houses, etc.
Through the chair, my understanding is we do have UPSs in place such that if the power was to cut out, there's a certain length of time for staff to be able to shut down systems. I'm not exactly certain of that length of time, but this is really referencing if there's a complete loss of power to the whole building.
Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, I'm looking on the other page. I'm looking at the mobile phones. That seemed to be an ongoing issue, and it hasn't started yet. I think it was June 22. It was supposed to be looked at. It's on page 93 of 134, number 3, mobile phone management. Oh, that's different again, isn't it?
Through the chair, look, I must probably have to take that on notice again, Councillor Kosh, to speak to the relevant staff on that.
Are there any other comments, Peter? Did you have anything to add? No? Okay, Christine?
Just a question about process. So still on that page 93, Unifleet automatic reminder function. Originally, it had a due date of September 21 and now it's got April 2023. So I'm just, and there's a few other examples like that where the original due date crossed out and a new one put in. Is that a conscious decision that it's now not as high priority, so therefore will be done later? Or is it a resourcing issue where it couldn't be done because there wasn't enough resources?
Through the chair, I think with some of certainly with some of these actions, yes, resourcing issues comes into play, but also noting on page 93, I think another key element is the items listed on that page were identified as opportunities for improvement. So I would envisage not necessarily given as high level of focus, understandably compared to the actions that were identified to be that were found from the audit. So we're listing here what those opportunities for improvement were, and yes, for a number of factors, some of them have been sort of deferred, but I think it's important to note, yeah, these weren't sort of findings from the audit as such, more findings of opportunities for improvement at a later date.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, it mentions the after hours phone service as a savings. I was just curious, we might not have the right staff here to answer this, but if there's been an increased level of satisfaction with the after hours phone service?
Through the chair, Councillor Davies, what page are you specifically referring? Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that on the next item?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I went a page over. There we go.
Okay.
So I'll mention
Just
it.
hold that and wait for the next one. Are there any other comments or questions? I think it's a good report. I think if we can just make the comments a little bit more robust. So if there's a change in the due date, I like how it's marked, you just haven't changed it, that we can see that that's been extended, but it'd be good to see why it's been extended. If the action hasn't been, if it's not progressed at the current time, with just a little bit more explanation as to why it hasn't been progressed at the other time, I think that'll help our review and sort of, reduce the number of questions and just keep it transparent. So, and if it's, and once again, this brings in sort of the risk appetite statement as well. So if you determine if it's a process improvement opportunity and, you've assessed the risk and other items are taking priority as part of that risk assessment, we'll then just state that, it has been deferred due to, being reprioritised. And I think that's a good, clear audit trail as to the decisions that have been made. Okay, all right. So do we have a mover for this item? Christine, seconder. Councillor Koch, all in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, so the next item is the business improvement, savings and efficiency. Councillor Davies, did you want to? Oh, Paul, did you want to comment on Councillor Davies' questions about the mobile phones? After hours, sorry. Oops.
Through the chair, just bear with me. So which number on that page, Councillor Davies?
Number one.
Oh, number one, yes. Through the chair, I most probably can't speak relative to if you're querying whether the standard of the services that's being provided is adequate. I can't personally speak to that. It looks like the mayor can, but we're just identifying through this process savings and efficiencies recorded, but it looks like the mayor can provide some comment.
Yep, go Mayor.
I've used it on several occasions and they pick up within the time frame, probably within 30 seconds, and they're very helpful and they follow through. So it's actually probably 150% better than the previous service, in my humble opinion.
All right. Councillor Koch.
Page 95, 134, number 23, the Gore Public Lighting, supply of luminaries. And it says, I thought we were actually contracting that out to SA Power Networks, that they were buying the bulbs. Is that what that means? Have we gone out and bought the bulbs now?
Are you asking the question?
Yes, because I remember it came to council and we made a decision that SA Power Networks were going to buy the bulbs, you know, but that reads as if we bought them and there was a risk about us buying them, a big risk.
Through the chair, again, this is just really referencing the dollar savings from that process. I'm not sure, Wendy, if you're in a position to provide comment, but we're not suggesting here, Councillor Koch, relative to the procurement process. All we're identifying here is the identified savings from that process. No.
Henry.
Yeah, there hasn't been any change to the procurement exercise relative to what was endorsed by council.
And thank you, Chair. Just through you, just to, I guess, to provide some overarching comments with this process, that because this has been an ongoing journey that the administration has been heavily focused on. And I know certainly when it was in its infancy, we dealt with the proverbial low-hanging fruit, which was sort of clear cost savings. But what we're certainly finding, and it's not unexpected, is that as we've dealt with those easy wins, Chair, to get further savings, we're actually having to do sort of the proverbial deep dive into processes and procedures, such that the items we're sort of presenting each year are now most probably progressing to efficiencies rather than actual cost savings. And sometimes those efficiencies, it's very hard to put a dollar value on them. But I just thought it was appropriate to demonstrate that as time progresses, we're focusing more on the deep dive of processes and procedures to try and deliver efficiencies in that space.
Yep. Peter, did you have anything to add? Oops, you're on mute. Yep.
The only comment, I think it's the process is working well, and I think there's some being good outcomes. So continue on, I guess. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I agree with Peter that it is a good process. Other organisations do it, and you can find significant cost savings through this process, even if it's just a little bit here, a little bit there. It all mounts up, and especially as we move into sort of the next financial year, and budgeting and everything, is that you're not going to have any more money, but the costs of services and goods have increased. So the only way that you're going to combat that is to really look at the contracts and what you're procuring, and making sure that any cost savings are identified in order to get more for less. Yes, Councillor Koch.
Oh, just reminded me something when you said that. I think there was some work on service reviews at the moment. Wasn't it? Is that going to come back to council before the end of this term or not?
Yes, so as I think I've mentioned previously to this committee, the workforce strategy for the depot operations is work in progress, and the first phase of that is service level reviews. Unfortunately, that process has been delayed, and also I haven't been satisfied with the level of information that we got to, but I am hopeful that we will have a workshop with this council before we go to the election to make sure that we get insights from this council, appreciating that shortly thereafter with the new council we'll go through the same process, or a refined conversation. So yes, that's the intent. And if I could, just on this whole conversation, it was only today that the working group that we have that meets on a monthly basis to talk about these efficiencies and effectiveness areas, and it includes finance department, includes procurement, includes the officer that's involved in sort of improvement activities and awareness, met today. And it is very much about, you know, there's no silver bullet here. It's about where can we, you know, challenge and explore opportunities. And so the list of focus areas that we've identified has come out of that internal working group, who then go back out into the organisation and sort of poke and prod and you know, work through those opportunities. So thank you.
Good. All right, are there any other comments or questions? No. All right, do I have a mover? Councillor Davies, seconder. Councillor Kosh, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, 7.4, which is the council comparative data report. Mayor Redmond, did you have a question first up?
A comment on page 106, which is the general rates for rateable property comparison. Gawler is 1790, Light is 2079, and Barossa is 2035. Just thought I'd point that out. Where actually our average rates are lower than our neighbours. So I think that's actually quite a, and I think it reflects the rate rises in recent years by other councils and the freezing of the rate in the dollar during the pandemic, rather than adjusting them when house prices went up. So I think that's actually a really good outcome from a Gawler perspective. Thank you.
Paul, did you have any comments you wanted to make overall? Your key takeaways from the reporting?
Yes. Yeah, through the chair, I must admit I do get a sense of excitement, if that's the right word, putting this together each year, because I think it's appropriate to do that sort of comparison with similar councils. As we've noted in the report, Chair, what we're looking to do from this report onwards, so that we can get this report to you on a more timely basis, we're no longer reliant on the Grants Commission database reports from the Grants Commission, because by the time council gets it, it's already 12 to 15 months out of date, hence why you're only getting the report for 30 June 21 in September 22. And we've also anecdotally noticed from time to time the unreliability of some of the data in the Grants Commission reports, and I'm very much like to focus on accurate detail. So what we've done here, members, is we're solely reliant on the audited financial statements of each council, which I think is appropriate to do so, because there's we've then pretty much got complete integrity with the results, because they've been independently audited for each council. And as we've noted in the report, Chair, we have added some additional new graphs to, I guess, provide a bit of more of an operational lens to the data. And I think we have members identified in the report on page 20 of 28. What I saw is some of the, I guess, as you referenced, Chair, the takeaway messages, as the Mayor has referenced already, relative to our rates position. And further to that, as we've noted in graph 4, in that 2021 financial year, our net increase in general rate revenue was only 1.31%, which is solely growth factor. And that was as a consequence of the one-off discretionary rate rebates that council provided to ratepayers as a consequence of the pandemic. And as the Mayor has rightly referred to, other councils at that time were saying they were freezing their rates, which was simply a case of freezing the rate in the dollar. and not necessarily having taken into consideration movements in property valuations. So I think that was a key point of separation between some other councils and ourselves. Noted too that from an operating surplus perspective on graph 16, 6 of the 8 councils had a adjusted operating surplus for that year. And the 2 that didn't, being Victor Harbour and Mount Gambier, both who had sizable deficits. We've noted in the report the specific reasons for that. So from a Victor Harbour perspective, in referencing their annual statements and annual report and annual financial statements as at that time, they had a extraordinary operating loss as a consequence of contaminated fill that was identified at the Regional Waste Authority, and had to respond to that, to providing a $9.8 million provision for that. And with Mount Gambier, they a couple of years back commenced their construction of a new recreation and convention centre. And I think, Chair, that to me again reaffirms to me that similar to council here, that each council does have its sort of what I call its asset management journey relative to, at different junctures, there will be the need to heavily invest in renewal, replacement of existing facilities. So for us, clearly that was the investment, the recent investment in recent years of this fantastic building. And similarly for Mount Gambier, they've identified the need for their recreation and convention centre of a sizable cost of $57 million. We've noted that they did attract sizable federal and state funding, but not unexpected, the consequence of that for them is increased depreciation on that $57 million investment, but also increased finance costs. But again, they've obviously demonstrated through their long-term financial planning that they're aspiring to return to within their ratio targets within sort of 4 to 5 years. So that's through the chair, what I have sort of demonstrated with various workshops with elected members over the years is, particularly from the net financial liabilities ratio, that will over time ebb and flow as the need for investment in certain replacement and renewal of assets is needed. So again, I stress there's no right or wrong answer in a lot of these ratios. It's really up to the individual council to determine, but I do believe, you know, this is I see a very useful exercise to go through on an annual basis, and happy to answer any questions that your members may have.
Councillor Kosh. Thanks. Yep, just looking at that table, page 125, with Barossa, is that a surplus of $7 million? Is that what it's saying?
Through the chair, what we're saying there, Councillor Kosh, is it's not a surplus. All we're saying is that their net, this is the movement in their net debt. So what we're demonstrating there is they had a reduction in net debt in the order of $6.9 million, where conversely Mount Gambier, for example, had an increase in their net debt of $13.7 million. So it doesn't relate to like operating surplus. It's purely just the movement in each council's net debt. Well, through the chair, I don't know what their on graph 15, what we're saying is for Barossa, yeah, they've actually got a sort of a surplus net debt, if you like, of $7 million. Well, no, it's essentially what it means is that as we've, in terms of the notes to that graph, we're saying this is the net indebtedness of council after allowing for cash and cash equivalents. So what it's meaning through the chair is that their level of cash and cash equivalents, and I know from my time there that they did generate considerable operating surpluses from their CWMS scheme. And I know what they've done there, Chair, is different to what I was doing when I was there. I was using those surplus funds to retire debt, but they've actually got a considerable debt, but they've also got a higher, well, obviously a very high level of investments, and the net consequence being that yes, that net debt position is a favourable one from after cash and investments are taken into consideration. So obviously I can't speak for how Barossa operate, but all we're demonstrating here is the difference in the net debt for each council.
Councillor Davies.
So page 108, in regard to the minimum rate and fixed charge, I guess just any comments on our decision to go with a minimum rate rather than a fixed charge?
Yes, through the chair, a valid question, Councillor Davies, relative to, from a rating perspective, under the Act, a council can either apply a minimum rate or fixed charge. You can't do both. And interestingly, I think we've referenced in the comments, Chair, that similar to previous years, the split across the state of councils who have a fixed charge compared to minimum rate is essentially 50-50. And there's no right or wrong answer in this space. All I would suggest, if council was ever seeking to transition to a fixed charge, that is a sizable piece of work to do that, because you need to consider the financial consequences on each ratepayer, and it is a massive piece of work. It's not an overnight consideration. And but the other thing I think worthy to point out with the key differences between the two is, from a fixed charge perspective, what that means is the fixed charge is an amount that's applied before any consideration of a rate in the dollar. So in short, Chair, what that means is any council who applies a fixed charge will, all else being equal, invariably have a considerably lower rate in the dollar than a council with a minimum rate. And so that's a key reason, for example, where I think Playford, from memory, I know that they're not in the data here, but they have a fixed charge from memory in the order of $900. And what that means is they have, I think, just about the lowest residential rate in the dollar in the state. Now, at face value, that might sound great, and they might be able to spruik that, but to compare apples with apples, yeah, it's not an easy exercise to do when you're looking just at the rate in the dollar anymore, because yeah, the rate in the dollar gets skewed by the level of the fixed charge applied. So again, stress members, there's no right or wrong answer in this space, and it's up for council to consider each year. But again, stress to transition from one to the other it's a major rating review that needs to be undertaken and consulted with ratepayers.
So any other questions or comments? Peter? Yep.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to refer back to the graph 6, which was the comparison between the various councils. which the mayor referred to. I mean, it looks quite good there, but I think a graph like that is covering a whole lot of sins which are not really evident in there, because it compares all properties within the council area and divides it by the number of properties that in there. Whereas I think it's more interesting and provides better information if somehow we could get a better picture on, say, residential ratepayers versus commercial versus primary production. So, for example, Light has a high rate average than Gawler, but it probably has a lot more primary production properties, which then boosts the residential population, which then changes the average. So you can't discern from these pictures how your residential properties are paying compared to, and they're the base, they're generally the main volume of ratepayers and voters, should I say? Yeah. So I don't know, Paul, if there's some way of you can't get that from the financial statement, but maybe there's some way of getting some better data.
Yeah, through the chair, if I can just comment on that, because it's a valid question, Peter, that historically with this report, we have actually endeavoured to compare the average residential rates, but historically, Chair, what we found is that is invariably quite difficult to calculate, because you're having to take into consideration average property valuations and the like, and sometimes that information is a bit sort of difficult to accurately gather. But you certainly take on board your point that yes, this is looking at all properties, residential, commercial, vacant land, etc. As we have referenced in the report, members, I think it's important to point out, as we've noted, the synergy between graph 6 and graph 9. Graph 9 being the financial assistance grant funding per rateable property, which previously in iterations we haven't provided in this report, members, but I've always been curious relative to particularly Mount Gambier. I've always noted they've had the case of having very cheap rates, and I would beg to suggest that graph 9 demonstrates a clear case of how that is achieved by the fact that, for whatever reason, reasons I'm not aware of, because the calculation for each, the calculation of the FAGs, what's called the FAGs grant for each council, is extremely complex, deliberately complex, so that no council can sort of manufacture or orchestrate an outcome to impact that grant funding. But I do think it's interesting to note on graph 9, Mount Gambier and ourselves do have comparatively higher financial assistance grant funding per rateable property, which I think does then segue into graph 6, in that it does I guess assist ourselves and Mount Gambier, for that matter, having comparatively lower rates now overall, but certainly happy to consider for future iterations if the committee wishes to get a better understanding of like residential and commercial, if that's the wish of the committee, because and in that space, what I do note is different councils will carve up what I call the rates pie differently between residential, commercial. So again, there's no right or wrong answer, but if the committee's keen to see that drill down by land use categories, we're happy to provide it in future iterations.
Peter?
Yeah, I personally, I think it would be useful to get that drilling down to land use. It's not impossible to get a good indication of the comparisons in that category. And I think by far and away the greatest interest in rates is in the residential category. You get very little discussion about commercial and industrial rates or rate averages. They don't seem to complain so much, and yet there's some big variations there. You talk about Playford, for example. There's huge variations. They might have a low rate in the dollar for residential, but just have a good look at the commercial and industrial sector, and it's unbelievable. So I do think that there's some merit in getting some information for council's own purposes to understand where it is in that land use sector, primarily the residential sector, I believe.
Yep. So taking a note. All right, any other questions or comments? No, we're all good. I've got a mover. Christine, seconder. Oh, Peter Fairley Jones. Got to remember to look up. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, the next item 7.5, which is the data analysis report. Lakesh, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, through the chair. So this is the report that we do twice in a year. And this report is a reflection of how the debtors are traveling within the council. So it's pretty straightforward. We have set a target of 4% for the rates debtors. And if you see, like as of end of 30th of June, we have got about 4.17% of the rates revenue, which is equivalent to about $1 million in dollar value. And then the debtors are amounting to 599,000, of which 500,000 is just one debtor. So majority is on one debtor, which we are chasing. So yeah.
And can you provide a little bit more detail on that, just as way of background on that? Yep. 500,000?
So with the 500,000, it is the contribution that council collects on behalf of the state government for Gawler East Link Road. Yep. And that money that council collect then goes back to the state from the developer. Yep. And then so it's sort of like we are not making that payment to the state before we are receiving that money from the contributor. So it's not net effect to the council is almost zero. Yeah. But it's just the timing that we have raised the invoice, but we haven't received the money. So it's showing as a 90 days plus outstanding as at end of June.
Yeah. So the other side of it is
not
pay. You've paid it.
Yep. So, we haven't paid. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Mayor Redmond.
Thank you. It's a good report. The Civic Centre, there's 30 to 60 days, 2,970. Can we have some sort of clarifying comments around that?
So with the Civic Centre, before coming to this meeting, I have checked with our debtors officer, and what she has suggested is that we have only got the current, which is $3,575, and 2,970, which is the outstanding. So and you are inquiring about $2,970. What's that? I can take that on notice and I'll come back to the committee.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, mostly just out of curiosity, but the aquatic centre, we seem to owe someone $30. What does the minus mean in this particular situation?
So you're correct. The minus means like we are in credit. So it may have been that somebody has paid for their swimming lessons in advance or something, and then we have to it's basically showed as a credit. As soon as they draw down on their lessons, it will be balanced.
Mayor Redmond.
Just looking at the health inspections, total of 22,238. Are they penalties that haven't been paid, or what's the nature of that?
Through the chair, I would suspect that they have just been inspections that have occurred, pure health inspections undertaken by our health officers, but similar to the Civic Centre before, we can take that on notice and provide a response to you, Mayor.
Are there any other questions or comments? Christine, Peter, did you have anything to say? No? Okay, I got we're noting the report. We've got a mover. Oh, sorry, Lakesh.
I just realized that with that health inspections, so they mostly relate to the food inspections. So there is a note, which is note 5. And it mostly says like that's basically for food inspections which are carried out from the inspector.
I appreciate that, but there's $22,000 of debt that hasn't been paid. So I'm just querying what the nature of that payment is. Do people pay council to have those health inspections? Is that what happens? I'm just asking a question. And we haven't got $22,000. Is that correct? Have I read that correctly?
So yes, like we have got $22,000 worth of debt, out of which 19,821 is current. So that hasn't fallen due yet. But yeah, I take your question. I understand like what you're asking is, do we first get money and then we do inspection, or do we first do inspection and then invoice? Yep. We can provide you like a bit more response in that regard.
That'd be good. All right. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kosh, seconder, Peter Fairley-Jones, all in favour, carried unanimously. Okay, item 7.6 is the Audit Committee Work Plan, the FY22 final progress report. Paul?
Thank you. Through the chair, similar to the annual report that was provided, and similar to what we provide with every other meeting, this is the final progress report relative to the actions in the work plan that were undertaken during the 21-22 financial year. So providing it for information purposes, and happy to answer any queries members may have, Chair.
Are there any questions or comments? No, no. Peter, did you have anything? No? All right, do I have a mover? Christine, seconder, Councillor Davies, all in favour, carried unanimously. Okay. Item 8 is item listed for discussion. Are there any items listed for discussion? No. Number 9 is questions without notice. Number 10, motions without notice. No? Excellent. Just before we close the meeting, I understand it's Paul's final meeting, and as Christine, as a new member, I think you can understand how much we rely on Paul for a lot of information. So, you know, Chair of the committee, I'd like to thank you, Paul, for all your contribution over a number of years. I'm not sure whether, Peter, you would like to elaborate on that, seeing you've been on the audit committee a little bit longer than me.
Yeah, well, I certainly second your comments there. Paul's been a terrific contributor to, I think it's probably well recognised, this council, and also the local government generally in many respects. So it's unfortunate to have to lose such a valuable and productive employee. So, and the work he's done for this committee has been exemplary. So, yeah, thank you, Paul, for the work you've done, and all the best wishes for the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that, and thank you, members, for those kind words. Much appreciated.
And when's your last actual day?
7th of October in 22 working days, but I'm not counting. Chair.
Count. Excellent, thank you. All right, well, then if we're all done, we'll close the meeting at 8:53. And our next meeting is on Tuesday, the 1st of November. Is that Melbourne Cup Day? Melbourne Cup Day. Is that your parting gift, Paul? All right, thank you, everybody.